The so-called authorities and WNBA players made some of the most ridiculous accusations against Caitlin Clark a few days ago. However, they were struck by instant karma this time. They even went so far as to label Clark the most egregious trash talker in WNBA history. Are we seeing the same Caitlin Clark, really? Even after Dejanai Carrington jabbed her in the eye or Angel Reese almost dislocated her arm, she never speaks. During all of that, Clark didn't even raise her voice to defend herself. However, they are suddenly behaving as though she is trash-talking everywhere. Even though the entire situation seemed absurd, Clark finally had enough and refused to back down this time. Because let's face it, if she hadn't, these individuals would continue to fabricate stories, label her, and try any means necessary to silence her. A shocking article with headlines claiming that WNBA players were calling Clark the most ridiculous trash talker they had ever seen was the catalyst for the dispute. Clark? Caitlin? Is this the same Caitlin Clark who is notorious for avoiding all of the on-court chit-chat? This statement seems made out of thin air to anyone who has followed her career. Considering how she manages herself when things become difficult on the court, it's a crazy stretch. Let's dissect how ridiculous this is. Although Clark is a formidable competitor, she keeps her mouth shut. She is the player who maintains a laser-like focus even when pandemonium breaks out, and she has undoubtedly experienced chaos. Numerous pieces of evidence demonstrate that Clark is more interested in basketball than in trash talk. Nevertheless, we see certain players frantically attempting to portray her as the league's biggest villain. Do you want to discuss how cruel Caitlin Clark's situation has become? Consider June 12, 2024. Big stakes, a crucial playoff game, and Clark right in the heart of a nightmare. One of the Connecticut Sun's hardest players, Dejanai Carrington, goes in and hits Clark in the eye. Furthermore, we're not referring to a casual bump, the kind of blow that would have most players sprawled out on the floor. This one left Clark seeing stars. Despite having trouble focusing and being half blind, Clark continued to play the game. It wasn't just any game either. After a season in which Clark had sacrificed everything to lead her team to victory, this cheap shot was the final straw. What followed? You'll adore this. The referees ignored Clark's obvious anguish, despite her flinching and face clenching. Not even a second look, no whistle, no foul call. It seemed as though Clark and her supporters were the only ones who saw the entire event take place in a parallel dimension. While the referees pretended she was dreaming, she was attempting to understand a game she could hardly see. One would think that such a flagrant strike would be worthy of some protection. False. Being left. To fend for herself, Clark did just that because, let's face it, that's who she is. She didn't say anything even then. No demonstrations, no public outbursts. She continued to play with the same tenacity that makes her unique. However, it only gets worse for her supporters when they see how gracefully she handles these situations. How come someone who is so dedicated to the game and so focused is consistently ignored when it matters? It's frustrating and exacerbates the mounting annoyance at Clark's constant disregard by those in charge of upholding the law. The WNBA's discriminatory practices are so obvious that they could pass for neon signs. For instance, consider Aja Wilson. Nia Okwu gave her a foul call just last month for what appeared to be a light breeze. The referees are crickets, and Clark can get half of her face altered in the meanwhile. It's astounding. Fans of Clark have had enough. They have had enough of seeing her risk her life only to be abandoned by officials who don't seem to give a damn. Fans of Clark are over this episode with Carrington, which was only the most recent insult. If you thought it was awful, go back to the NCAA tournament on March 29, 2023, and watch as Clark and Angel Reese got into a heated argument. Reese became so aggressive that she almost broke Clark's arm in two. Visibly uncomfortable, Clark attempted to shake off the discomfort, but Reese dismissed it as a basketball play, as though almost hurting someone was normal. Clark had the option to protest and retaliate with charges, but she chose not to. As usual, she chose the high road. Naturally, the media exacerbated the situation. They attacked Clark, accusing her of being tough enough or lacking emotional control, as though she were the issue, rather than pointing out Reese's carelessness. It seems as though we have reached a surreal world where Clark is punished for maintaining composure. Clark continued to play, remain mute, and get unfair treatment despite the media's fabrication. On September 14, 2024, Alyssa Thomas, the Connecticut Sun's powerhouse, accused Clark and her entire staff of bigotry, which sent poor Clark to yet another low. She did indeed go there. Everyone's mouths were dropped by this charge, which was more than just a sporting feud. Naturally, media outlets quickly blew it up into a full-fledged circus. What's funny? Thomas's allegation was not supported by any evidence at all. No quotes, no videos, and no receipts. Despite this, the narrative continued to spread like wildfire. It seemed like a last-ditch effort to disparage someone whose only crime is being a very skilled basketball player. But the harm had already been done. The media only wanted something scandalous to sell. They didn't care about little details like facts. Clark, the athlete whose entire career has been based on unwavering dedication, was caught in the crossfire. What was her reaction? Quiet. Nothing. Clark did what she does best, which is to remain completely focused on the game, while everyone else could have released a statement or gone on a tirade on social media. No response could overpower her quiet. Power. Just basketball, no drama, no distractions. For Clark, it comes naturally, but most athletes can't even mimic that grace. She refused to publicly defend herself despite the unwarranted questioning of her reputation. As always, she demonstrated a maturity well beyond her years by letting her game speak for itself. The smear nevertheless made its impression, even unfounded. Charges have a tendency to stay, and this one had a lasting impact. She was followed by whispers, and side-eyes were incorporated into the story. Known for her unwavering work ethic, Clark was suddenly faced with an additional, wholly undeserved load. Really, bearing the consequences of someone else's irrational remarks is annoying. Nevertheless, she persevered through everything, never letting the absurdity divert her course. Her admirers weren't going to ignore this. They flooded social media with support, going into full-on defense mode. It was a battle for her honor rather than merely supporting their favorite athlete. They pointed out the evident absence of evidence and criticized Thomas for his absurd charge, and don't believe that this was a singular incident. Over her career, Clark has been the subject of ridiculous scrutiny. The opposing player might have lost their temper after Kelsey Plum gave her such a strong elbow in the ribs during the March 2024 game against the Las Vegas Aces. However, Clark, after taking a moment to collect her breath, she resumed her task. No drama, no retaliation, just concentration. She stands out from the others because of her unwavering poise. Clark is one of the most renowned players in women's basketball because she maintained her head in the game while other players might have thrown an elbow right back. So how did this reputation as a trash talker even begin? To be honest, it seems like everyone was looking for anything to be critical of her. Yes, Caitlin Clark plays with passion and fire, and she is intense. But disparaging opponents? She simply doesn't do that. Instead of using words carelessly, she is concentrating on her game, making moves, and winning. Instead than engaging in pointless back and forth with other players, she devotes all of her energy to the court. Take a look at her record, it speaks for itself.